Hi everyone, today I'll be talking about a major issue in STEM, and that is how women do not get enough funding for their research in comparison to their male counterparts who do get more funding in research. There is a lot of bias in science, and unfortunately, researchers aren't the only one that have to face that. There are a lot of other professions that have to face biasness as well. But today, in particular, we're going to be talking about how female researchers have to face biasness and the effects of that. There are three major effects when women don't get enough funding, one of them being less research output. The second one being there's less women going into STEM, and the last one being how there are careers being damaged. So let's look at the first effect. The first effect is how there is less research being done by women. The NIH, which is the National Institute of Health, conducted a research where they found out that out of all its female applicants, only 31% of them received the grant. That's less than a third of them that received funding for their research. NIH also conducted a research called Survival by Gender. Survival by Gender is basically data that shows the chances of whether a male or female would survive in a particular field for a given amount of time. In this particular data, it shows the chances of males and females staying in the field of research within a 25-year span. And the research, to our surprise, showed that women have a higher chance of survival than men. But this is only data for women who have received funding. Now, we all know that women receive a short amount of funding than men. Survival by gender is a dream come true for women, the small percentage of women who have received their fundings. What about the other large percentage of women who didn't receive their funding? They have a less chance of survival, meaning that there's less research going on for them. And that only affects the science community when most women don't get funding. It means that there are less chances of breakthroughs and discoveries happening that could benefit the science world itself. We are currently learning so much about the world and the science behind it that we need more researchers, especially women, to help us conduct different researches and find out more about the world. But because women don't get enough funding, there's less research being done. The NIH study that I just showed of how only 31% of women receive grants proves how there's not enough women doing research, and therefore there's not enough research output out there. Now let's go on to the second effect of women not receiving enough funding, and that is there is less women going into STEM. When women find out that they're not being funded for a particular research project, they're more inclined to leave the field of research. When the younger generation of women find out about the bias in research, there is a less chance that they'll go into STEM. The Netherlands Organization of Scientific Research, also known as NWO, did a research where they conducted the quality of research that women produce. So there are three aspects. There's the research itself, there's the proposal, and there's the utilization. And they measured the amount of scientists that provided quality to all three aspects. To a lot of people's surprise, women actually did a lot better in quality for all three aspects than men. There wasn't a significant difference between the two genders, but there was still a difference, especially when it came to the quality of research, which is something to take into account. Yet women in the Netherlands still don't get enough funding as men do, even if they exceed in all three aspects of utilization, proposal, and research. Now, this is an issue that a lot of countries face. A lot of countries are heavily involved in research, and a lot of females have to deal with this bias that occurs when it comes to funding. This bias mentality that many people all over the world have is what prevents us from moving forward as a society and making an impact in the world of science. When a country like the Netherlands, which is one of the best countries in the world, has to deal with the issue of female researchers not getting enough funding, it proves to show how it's an international issue. So when females find out that their quality of research is excellent, yet they don't receive enough funding, it's frustrating, and it really drives people away from STEM because they find out that, hey, males are getting more funding than we are. What's the point of us going into STEM? It's unfair and it's frustrating. It's something that we shouldn't have to deal with, especially in 2019, but it's current and it's happening all over the world every day. The Netherlands Organization of Scientific Research did another study where they looked at the percentage of males and females that applied, and those that did apply, the percentage that received an award. As expected, males had a higher chance of getting their application approved, and they also had a higher chance of getting a financial award in comparison to females. The data showed that around less than 40% of females got a financial award. Meanwhile, males, on the other hand, had around 70% of the financial award. This really discourages women and drives them away from the world of research. If men and women got paid the equal amount, things might have been really different. And STEM, in all would be a very diverse field with both male and female researchers playing a huge role in finding major discoveries and breakthroughs. Now, let's look at the last effect of females not getting enough funding, and that's their careers being at risk. It's their careers being damaged. Their career is something that they love so much and they're really passionate about, but because of them not getting enough funding, they're at stake and they're at a huge risk. The Journal of the American Medical Association did research and found out that, on average, women get around $41,000 less in funding than men do. And that's an average number. They might get even less funding than that. Caroline Abdallah, an otolaryngologist at the University of Southern California, explains how the grant a woman receives, especially at the beginning of her career, plays a role in determining the trajectory of her career. Receiving less funding harms her potential to succeed in her career as she has a tougher time to conduct research. Think of it this way. The woman who receives a grant can see the finish line, which is her work being published, whereas the woman who doesn't receive the grant can't even see the finish line and sees no chance of her work being published at all. The National Academy of Sciences, in their particular research, quoted a statement from a neuroscientist that states how it's really tough because the funding that she receives is just not enough for her to conduct research, and it's just not enough for her to support herself, as well as she works around 60 plus hours a week, works super hard, and she still doesn't get the compensation that she needs from her funding. And it's not only her, it's a lot of other women that she says faces the same issue as well. The National Academy of Sciences, in their research, also states that married women who are doctoral students with children are 35% less likely to enter a tenure-track position after receiving a PhD. And it's not because they have children, it's because the amount of funding they get isn't enough to conduct enough research, and when they don't have enough research, they don't get paid a lot, which isn't enough to support their families. Funding and salary usually go hand in hand, and that's how a woman's career gets ruined. Now, let's recap and look at the 3 effects of when women don't get enough funding as their male counterparts. The first one is there is less research being conducted. The second one is there is less women going into STEM after they find out the bias that happens in research. And the third one is that careers are being damaged, they're being ruined, and something that women have worked really hard for doesn't pay off because of the funding that they received. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope we as a society advocate for the same funding between male researchers and female researchers.